Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, stories and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out the articles, videos and more at passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your technical questions answered and contribute to the community forum, and of course, attend the weekly online Global Passive House Happy Hour. Now, here's this week's Passive House podcast. Welcome back to the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutley-Washington, coming to you from Auckland in New Zealand.
And I'm Zach Semke in Seattle.
And we're definitely in the depths of winter here. School holidays on, and we've had a few frosts in Auckland, which doesn't happen very often. It hasn't been quite down to zero air temperature, but had a few cool, clear nights. So definitely feeling the cold, but things have cooled down slightly from the heat dome that you experienced in your part of the world.
Yes, indeed. It's 60 degrees out and cloudy and glorious in Seattle right now. So we're very happy to have moved beyond the dome, or the dome has moved beyond us. So
for now, yes, I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that for you as well. But we are definitely conscious of these extreme events happening on a more regular basis, which is evidence that things are changing, and that means that we not only have to stop polluting the atmosphere, and that's becoming more obvious, but we also have to recognise that things are going to get more extreme, and we have to design buildings to cope with that, which, I think is becoming more and more recognised. Certainly there's interest in that in this part of the world, and I gather that's happening in your part of the world as well.
It is, and Passive House can do both. It's both climate mitigation and climate adaptation. So it's so I guess we're relevant.
We're totally relevant. It feels good to be relevant.
Yeah, it does. I wish it were for happier reasons, but
I was going to say it's not great to be relevant for such. They're becoming a little bit dire in some situations, but there's definitely significant impacts going on. But we want to try and shed a positive light on all of that, which is partly why we do this, to try and reach out to inspiring people who are doing great work in this space. But before we get into that, we've got a few people to thank for helping bring us the Passive House podcast.
We do indeed. Everything we do at the Accelerator comes thanks to support from our sponsors. Our founding sponsors are 475 High Performance Building Supply, Baxtingwe Architects, Glavel Foam Glass Gravel, Minotaur, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, RDH Building Science, Rockwool North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. Our champion sponsor is SIGA, and our stakeholder partner is NYSERDA, the New York State Energy and Research Development Authority. So big thank you to our sponsors.
All right. Well, let's get into this week's interview, which is a conversation I had a little while ago with Norm Horn of Envinity. Now, Norm is I think he's a bit of a regular, isn't he, Zach?
He is, yeah. He's definitely a part of the Passive House Accelerator community for sure.
Yeah, and that's where I first connected with him. If you haven't been on the Passive House Happy Hour or Tech Tuesday sessions, fantastic events, not just for the content, but also for the networking. It's really active chat channels going on. And quite often, I very rarely come away from one of those sessions without having made a new connection on LinkedIn. And that's exactly what happened in this case. And we started chatting online and sent a couple of messages back and forth, and eventually found that Norm was doing some interesting projects and wanted to find out a little bit more, particularly as Norm, I think, is fairly unique in that he's both a certified Passive House tradesperson as well as a certified Passive House consultant, which is not easy to do. They're both pretty challenging courses. So I wanted to find out a little bit more about what Norm does. He is currently the design and build manager for Envinity, which is in State College, Pennsylvania. That's where their base is. Envinity has been a leader in green design and construction of energy efficiency since they formed in 2005, and as well as renovating and creating new buildings of all types. They have a lot of interest in solar energy, both design and installation. They pride themselves in building buildings that are environmentally responsible, less costly to operate, healthy and enjoyable for their occupants. So here he is. Enjoy my conversation with Norm Horn. Thank you, Norm. It's great to get you on the podcast. It's a pleasure to talk with you. Tell us where you are at the moment for listeners so they can picture where you are and what you're doing.
Yeah, so right now I'm in Kane, Pennsylvania, which is a town of about 3,500 people, right in the middle of the Allegheny National Forest. We're in northwest Pennsylvania, near really nothing. It's fairly remote out here, so we're 2 hours away from where I live in State College, Pennsylvania, which is right in the center of the state. So I'm working on basically field operations, construction management of a 12,000 square foot, 3-story in-town masonry retrofit to the Enerfit standard.
So, and right now you're in a little box, which will become a studio eventually, but
Something like
not right
that,
now.
Yeah.
How long's the building been there already? Do you know?
I believe it was constructed in the 1890s. It was originally a 2-story building, and then its neighboring buildings went in on each side of it as 3-story buildings. And then sometime in, I think about 19 teens or 20s, they put a 3rd story on ours, just built on top of the party walls of our neighbors who had built on top of our parapets. So it's one big interconnected block.
It's quite a large building for being in the middle of nowhere.
Well, I mean, it's to the scale of a town. I mean, the neighboring buildings are about the same size. You know, we're about anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 feet per floor in these buildings.
Yeah. And do you know where the incentive came for doing an Enerfit project? Because that's not a small task in anywhere, but in a remote location, I don't imagine there's a lot of passive house buildings around. Why is it being an Enerfit?
So that was driven by the owner, actually, which is kind of a neat story. It's owned by a nonprofit, the West Penn Power Sustainable Energy Fund, and to date they had funded energy efficiency projects, a lot of solar work, some LEED buildings. And this is kind of their evolution of their nonprofit into community and economic development through energy efficiency. So this is sort of a strategic move for them to pick up this building, because the neighboring building houses a private business, which is a letterpress printing operation. The second floor of that building, where I'm currently sitting, is going to be the offices for the PA Wilds, which is a conservation landscape within the Department of DCNR here in Pennsylvania. So West Penn Power Sustainable Energy Fund had funded a portion of the PA Wild space. So for them to get the building next door and use that as a place for, say, rural economic development, business development, outreach, education. Really, it starts to grow this center of thought. We're putting in an elevator into our space, which will connect to this neighboring building. So we open up, 4,000 square feet per floor on our above street level spaces, plus another 3,000 per floor on the neighboring building that would normally just sit vacant in a small town because it's inaccessible. You can't get by with the ADA requirements.
Oh wow! Now you mentioned West Penn and the fund there. There's been quite a bit of history with West Penn Power Sustainability Fund and your company Envinity. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, we've done a lot of work with them over the years. They've funded either through grants or loans a lot of projects that we've ended up working on, from smaller scale residential energy efficiency measures to residential projects and commercial projects.
How did you get involved in the first place? Because you're a builder by trade, is that right?
Yes. So
how did you end up working on energy efficiency projects and ultimately become Passive House, both tradesperson and designer?
Yeah, so it's been kind of an evolution for me. So I went to Penn State University back, straight out of high school into college for landscape architecture. And, through that program and, a bit of a failure to launch, so to speak, I ended up staying in State College. And, I had several degrees, a bachelor's in landscape architecture and a master's in landscape architecture, a couple of minors that I picked up along the way. And by the time I got done with school, I was just really kind of burnt out. And I'd always worked, construction jobs through summers or semester breaks, whatever, just to make some extra cash. So it was kind of an easy fallback way for me to survive right out of school. And, here I am 20 some years later, I'm still doing this. Never ended up practicing landscape architecture or even pursuing it as a career. Early part of my career in buildings, but did a lot on like high-end one-off oddball woodworking projects, smaller, additions and remodels, and never really thought a lot about sustainability, energy efficiency. Wasn't really interested in it. Didn't want to know about it. It was kind of easy to just slide by without knowing any more than I absolutely needed to do. And it was one of those things that just sort of, for whatever reason, one day I got curious about it, and I started working with Envinity, and they've been doing this for really as long as I had been doing it, sort of parallel, but not operating in the same space. So I learned a heck of a lot being here, and it wasn't until a couple of years ago we had a project come across that was a restaurant, a farm to table cafe, that the owners were going to try to build it to the Living Building Challenge standard. And it wasn't really until the planning of that project that I realized how much I didn't know. And that one was the one that kind of put me over the edge. So I ended up going and getting my Passive House Trades certification.
Prior to that, had you done some lead projects and some other green sort of sustainability rated projects?
No, nothing really rated. I mean, it was, there's the concept of the pretty good house out there. That's kind of like the, passive house inspired, but not the whole way to passive house and certification. That was kind of the space that we were operating in with residential projects.
A big part of Envinity has been doing and is to energy audits, both residential and commercial. When you first started getting into passive house, was there anything that was surprising or different from what you already knew? I'm thinking in particularly around air tightness, those sorts of things. Were they concepts that you're already familiar with energy auditing, or was passive house completely new?
No, it was definitely concepts that I was familiar with. Probably air tightness more than anything. But again, there was a whole level that I wasn't even aware of. We have been thinking we were doing pretty good with our houses. When we were doing, say, 1.5 air changes per hour at 50 when it was all said and done. I realized that's we can do better than that. So the last two that we've done, we just finalized one out at 0.5 ACH 50, and we did a midstream, mid mechanical rough in one on another place, and it was also 0.5. So I think we've done a really good job of upping our game the last couple of years.
Where to for you, but also for Envinity, now that you have that knowledge and the training? I mean, you did passive house training, I think, last year, so it's still fairly new. But is there a vision for how you go forward with that now that you know, because you can't unknow passive house once you know it? So
Yeah.
what's the plan from here?
Short, near term, I'm focused on getting this job in Kane done. It's pretty much become all consuming for me for the last couple of months here. Coming out of that,
yeah, well, literally, because you're traveling out there, staying out there during the week, aren't you? Because it's a bit of a trek out that way.
It's 2 hours from where I live, so I come up here on Tuesday mornings, and I stay here until Friday evenings, and then go home for the weekend on Monday. Yeah.
That is all consuming.
Pretty much. And I think next steps for me is I'd really like to do what I can to get some passive houses built in our town in State College. Whether that's private residence or if it's more of a social housing sort of situation, whatever it takes. We have one project right now. I'm working with the architect and passive house designer from the Kane project for a retrofit on a 9-unit mid-century modern townhome back at State College. So we're just sort of in the very early stages of a feasibility study to get that to the EnerFit standard.
Because you have a design team. You have a design team as well, right, at Envinity?
We do and we don't. The other two project managers that I work with in our design build side, one is a really talented designer. The other's licensed PE. So we do design work within our comfort zone. We also frequently partner up with local architects to get clients to the whatever their end result needs to be. So we'll work with a local architect at the conceptual and design development level to really get all the performance aspects built in early on, rather than going back
Yeah.
and trying to apply the green filter, so to speak. I mean, we've found that works really well. Lets everyone do what they're good at, right?
It sounds like there's a bit of a market and a demand. Have you had to change the marketing or go out and find people who are interested in going down the passive house route, or is there a bit of a appetite already in your region for that type of work and to go through to either certification or to go to the NFIT standard if it's a retrofit?
I think for private, residential projects, I think it's going to take a little bit of work to continue to make the sale on that. We have people that come to us and they want energy efficient, comfortable homes. There's also, I feel like, an uphill battle that we're really having to fight against the people coming to us with the preconceived notion that it's going to cost a lot more than a code built home. So, I mean, yeah, there's going to be a certain level of cost associated with doing more, but I think that a lot of people feel like that's a bigger jump than what it actually is.
Do you have some numbers from the projects that you've started on to be able to show them, or is it just a matter of working through with them the options and then showing them the prices? Yeah,
I mean, really everything we do is something a little bit different every time. So it's tough to, we don't have anything really standardized to tell people like, yeah, it's going to cost this per square foot, and that's the way it's going to be.
Are people receptive to the other side of that, which is the savings down the track of the running costs? Do you have to sort of prove to them or show them what the running costs will be, or is it okay just to have a conversation to say, yeah, it's going to cost a little bit more up front, but you're going to be healthier, more comfortable, and it's going to cost less to run?
Yeah, I think people in general want to see what those numbers are. It's difficult to convey things like, comfort and, quietness, the more, intangibles, right? Up front.
Yeah. Stuff that's hard to take a photo of.
Yeah. It's the kind of thing like once you've experienced it, then yeah, you get it, but it's difficult to just sell that based on, hey, take my word for it, it's going to be quiet, or take my word for it.
Yeah.
You're not going to need a sweater, so.
Yeah. The project that you're working on right now, you said, so what was the construction, was it concrete or block?
It's 3 white brick.
So what are the biggest challenges for getting that to the NFIT standard?
So far, we've put a lot of effort into masonry repair. I mean, we've got, I don't know how many thousands of square feet of brick that needed to be cleaned on the inside, repointed. We had some, numerous old holes through the building for, windows, doors that went away. There used to be a bar and a restaurant down on the first floor, so there was kitchen equipment that went through the walls. We have several hundred joist penetrations that we have to work,
Wow,
for sealing around those. So it's a lot of just chasing down areas and making sure that we get everything cleaned up, fixed up, and then hitting it with fluid applied air barrier products. And getting things clean, keeping things clean is kind of a constant battle.
With all the brick and the mortar, I imagine that is tricky. So you're doing liquid applied membrane to the whole of the interior, or just around those tricky joints?
All of the interior. Yeah. So our air barrier is the inside face of the brick on the party walls and the rear elevation. The first floor is the air barrier, the roof deck, and then the backside of the front facade, which was brick, but we completely removed it, and it's now a steel frame with infill.
Are you having to add a lot of insulation?
For a passive house, I mean, it doesn't feel like we have a ton. We've got 8 inches of polyiso continuous across the roof. That satisfied PHPP. We have a 2x12 cavity for our first floor. The basement is outside of the thermal envelope. That with a continuous thermal break layer takes care of the floor. We're adding probably going to be like 8 inches continuous on the outside underneath our different cladding systems. But I don't feel like it's excessive by any means.
Right, and so I guess that by not having to worry too much about the heritage and the outside, you're able to add external insulation and then reclad on the outside. I imagine that's made it a little bit easier. And then what? Replacing all the windows?
Yeah. So we have we have 13 punched openings in the rear of the building, and those are going to be filled with some UPVC tilt turns and fixed units that are actually made here in Pennsylvania, just outside of Pittsburgh. And then we're doing a timber curtain wall system on the front of the building. So the front of the building will be about half timber curtain wall, and the other half will be clad in some sandstone that's quarried, again, about an hour and a half away from here.
Can you see yourself or Envinity as a company doing any lead projects, Living Building Challenge, any other sort of ratings, whether commercial or residential, into the future? Or do you think you'll move more completely into passive house?
I mean, my hope would be moving towards passive house exclusively, but I don't. Like I said, I mean, it takes a little bit of time to build the market. So hopefully we can work toward that.
Yeah. Well, I think you certainly are, and I think having more projects like that, particularly the Envinity, I'm really excited about those because, as we've had a number of people say, it's those existing buildings that are so critical that we figure out how to fix up because they're the legacy that already exists. And the work that you guys are doing is hard and really important because in some ways building new passive houses is kind of the easy stuff. It's fixing up the old existing stock, which is the hard work. So I take my hat off to you for doing that work. And I'm hoping that I think what you're describing there is definitely the content of a future, whether it's a Tech Tuesday or some sort of session on the Passive House Accelerator. It's definitely a contender for. I know that people will be very interested in seeing some pictures and how you've addressed some of those technical challenges. So well done, and thank you for sharing your experiences.
And there he was, Norm Horn of Envinity, coming to us from a construction site. And apologies for the audio quality for that interview. It's not always easy to get builders like that on the job. But it was great to be able to have the opportunity to speak to Norm. I think at this part of the journey as well, because he's learnt a bit about Passive House himself, and he's in that process of teaching his colleagues and trying to get others around him on board, because it makes a lot of sense to him. But he's wanting to bring out other people along that journey as well. What did you take out of that, Zach?
Well, what a great project. It's really wonderful to hear about these Enerfit projects, Passive House retrofit work, and taking, an old masonry building and breathing new life into it. And we were talking about climate mitigation and adaptation, right? And you taking these poorly performing buildings and transforming them into high performance structures is really important work. So to hear his journey from he said earlier in his career he almost kind of avoided energy efficiency, or just kind of wanted to know the whatever he absolutely had to get by, to having this evolution and starting to get curious about it, and then going through the training like you said, and just obviously it's become a passion for him. And so it must be gratifying to be doing a project like what he's doing right now.
Yeah, it's kind of jumping in the deep end.
Yeah,
doing
no doubt.
An Enerfit project is hard stuff. We talked a lot about the fact that building a new building and making it airtight and designing out thermal bridges and stuff, it's not easy, but it's relatively easy when you compare it to taking a big old structure like this and trying to figure all that stuff out. And the thing I like about people like Norm is that they really highlight the intelligence of builders to problem solve on the go. There's really no way that a designer or an architect can foresee everything in a retrofit project like that. They can't do all the details before the project starts. And a lot of it will come down to people like Norm on the ground, where they uncover something and then figure out, how we're going to deal with this and come up with a solution, usually in collaboration with the design team. But it's a real skill, and it's great to have people like Norm who are now looking at those types of issues through the lens of both a certified Passive House designer and a tradesperson.
Definitely. I was introduced to Passive House by builders when I was at Hammer in Hand, and by the late Sam Hagerman, who was the co-founder of Hammer in Hand, and he often described Passive House as the universal field theory of construction for him. That because it basically brought all these disparate learnings and insights that he had been having as a builder over the years, and brought it together into a cohesive way of understanding buildings. And so the passion that he and others at Hammer in Hand and other Passive House builders bring to this work comes from this understanding that it's just a better way to construct buildings. And so I think that some of the most important leaders in this space are ones who know what it's like to do one of these projects, in the dirt.
Yeah. Speaking of leadership, I think that's another really important message from Norm, is that you can be a leader no matter where you are in an organization. You don't have to be the director, the president, the owner of a company. You can be part of the team, and you can still be an early adopter within your organization, and then start to influence things and say, hey, why don't we give this a try? Or, I've done this training and I'd like to share some of the ideas, and then start to bring change about. Now, there's a section on the Envinity website that talks about Norm and his experience and how Passive House fits in with other things like the Living Building Challenge. So he's having an influence from within an organisation that doesn't currently have Passive House as their main focus, but he is making real change. And And by getting projects like the one he's working on, and then future ones, it'll spread out from there as other people experience the results.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that leadership also extends to sharing the lessons learned from this project with the broader community of Passive House practitioners as well. And I saw Norm at the conference in New York. I actually missed his presentation because I was busy doing a bunch of interviews with folks, but I'm looking forward to seeing it on the videos that just got published. But he was there in New York presenting about this project. He's as you were mentioning in the show too. He's doing the important work of sharing this with other architects who aren't necessarily Passive House, practitioners yet at the Pittsburgh AIA event. So I think like for maybe for folks who are listening who are in a similar place in their careers as Norm, I can imagine this would be inspiring, to see that trajectory, to get trained up, get your teeth sunk into the first couple of projects, and then you're at a different level suddenly in your career, and have the privilege of being able to share this new knowledge with your peers. It's cool stuff.
Yeah, awesome. And don't necessarily feel like you have to have a project that's there waiting at the other side of training either. Mm-hmm. It tends to come to people once you put yourself out there, got trained, and then the universe will send you a project.
Yeah, that's right. Especially, and that's more and more. That's true more and more. Right, every year it becomes more true. It used to be a 1 in 10 years event, maybe. We were just talking about weather events before.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Hey, well, that's a great reference back to the videos from the New York conference as well. Some great content there. And I love hearing from builders during conferences. I reckon they're some of the best. They're always some of the best presentations because they're so real.
Yeah.
Definitely check that out.
We're doing some bonus episodes too.
Yes,
from those.
Tell us about those.
Well, I had the chance to interview 18 people during the conference, which was really fun, really unique way to experience a conference. And so we've got a bunch of short conversations that we're publishing as little bonus episodes of the podcast. So you can check those out on the whatever channel that you listen to us on.
And if you're subscribed, you'll be receiving those because they're on the same feed as this podcast.
Yeah, it's a cool mix of people, leaders, folks who are also newer to Passive House, and designers and prefab, and just really really kind of cool broad cross section. So thanks to NAPHN for working with us on that.
What other events we got coming up?
Well, this week on Construction Tech Tuesday, we have Rob Hoskin, also based in Pennsylvania. I think he's in Pittsburgh. He's with Building Performance Architecture, and he's going to be presenting about protecting passive building performance. So join us on Tuesday or Wednesday, your time, for that. And then so in lieu of the happy hour this week, we are co-presenting New Gravity, the Accelerated Edition. So New Gravity is a conference that the Green Building United has been presenting in Philadelphia for several years now. And it's a really great conference that combines presentations about high performance building and affordable housing. So it's that nexus between basically, Passive House and affordable housing. And this year we're working, they invited the accelerator, New Green Building United invited us to collaborate with them to create this accelerated edition. It's going to be all online, of course, but it's also going to be shorter. There are two 2-hour chunks, one on Wednesday during the typical happy hour slot, and then another on Thursday during that same time slot. So 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern time. on both days. And it will kick off on Wednesday with a keynote by Dr. Kwesi Daniels, who's the head of architecture at Tuskegee University. And then there'll be presentations from folks in Seattle about a cool multifamily project that's part of a pilot that's working to move affordable housing practice in Seattle toward high performance and passive house. And then there's a collaboration between Illinois Green and FIAS around policy and affordable housing. A presentation by a woman from the Institute for Market Transformation around how policy can jumpstart affordable housing, and then one about justice and architecture as well. And then there'll be a cool forum at the end. So it's going to be great, and we'll include a link in show notes so people can join that, as well as, we've got a whole slate. There's a whole slate of Passive House conferences coming up in the fall from FIAS, from your organizations down under. There's a retrofit tower retrofit tower retrofit symposium being presented by Passive House Canada, and then also the International Passive House Conference. There's tons of stuff, so we'll share the details in show notes.
Yeah, and getting more and more hybrid events and back to some physical events. We're just starting to plan the South Pacific Passive House Conference here for Auckland, which we're hoping to get up to 200 people in the same room at the same time, which will be very exciting.
Yeah. It's cool. It's cool that there are those opportunities to be in person, and it's also cool that I think everything that I just mentioned can be accessed from the comfort of your computer chair.
Yeah. Nice. Which is great for networking.
Yeah.
Really, really cool stuff. And I just want to note, you mentioned there the some of the events looking at passive house and equality issues. There seems to be becoming more and more of that. There's a couple of events happening here, and more of a direction towards looking at equality, which I think is really interesting and definitely a great opportunity for us to talk about the benefits of passive houses beyond just individual single dwelling beautiful houses for rich people. Basically, it's just it shifts the whole affordability question. So really exciting stuff.
Yeah, equality and equity. And we have video recordings of a couple of recent accelerator events about that examine this. And so the Centering Equity and Passive House workshop is one, and then also the presentation by Setpal Kaur just a couple of weeks ago at the happy hour. She's going to be part of the New Gravity Conference, but she was also looking at injustice in buildings and how we can remedy injustice in our work as high performance building practitioners.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Thank you very much, Zach. Been a pleasure again this week, and we'll be back again next week with another great interview on the Passive House podcast.
Likewise, Matthew. Thank you.